Were you listening, my friends, to the first reading? It contains two phrases with which I would like to dwell for a few seconds. But let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak. If one were an angel, one would have an angelic vision of the world, going round and round, and one would hear more than we can hear. Do you know that around our atmosphere there are waves upon waves upon waves of words being transmitted, now multiplied to the nth degree? Compared with the time of our first creation, there has been a huge increase in words. Transmitted, pumped, accelerated, launched, reflected, deflected, up and down into space, all over the planet, and all over our land and our brain, which is where I want to land. We are surrounded on all sides by words. Did you listen to the gospel as well? There was one phrase there which I would like to leave with you. It's the prince of this world. The prince of this world. Do you know one of his most powerful tools? It is noise. Words. As Shakespeare said, words, words, words. Analyze your day. Is it, true or false, filled with words? Are you responsible for all of these words? There are many words which we do not have to have. Now, young people, by now, are so used to having access to words that they are by now physically incapable of not existing even for a few seconds without them. They have to have immediate access to something outside their soul. Observe what happens the first moment they are alone. Now, you may not realize the effect that that has over the modern soul. When, in all those years in perpetual silence in France, there was no access, certainly to artificial words, but even actually to immediate words, the psyche is radically changed, altered, simplified, virginified, and rendered simple. And the effect is that the slightest, e.g. written word, has a long echo in the caves and chasms of the mind. Also, words heard in the past come to the surface as though they had just been pronounced. The memory is like a video. A child now, growing up, without all that clutter, has a better chance of being a sponge. The average child in class now cannot sit still. Now, don't think that we're easily left off the hook either. It is not indifferent what words enter into our system. Just last night, on the way to hearing confessions in the parish, I called on a close friend. And because she texted me, and probably she's not going to live all that long. But one thing I was not aware of, it was this. Although she had stopped smoking a few years ago, they had found that emphysema and so on was coming in, but not just because of the damage done in the past, but because of this. Her closest friend is still, at least until very recently, a chain smoker. She too has had to stop, otherwise she's going to die. But she would be with her, perhaps for a couple of hours, and in that space she would go through a packet of 20 and go back into the car for another packet, so that by the end of her session of talking, she would have had about 36 cigarettes, all in the presence of my friend, who was already gravely damaged by the effects of her own smoking. And it turned out that the medical staff were picking up that she was perhaps dying from passive smoking. Now, that is a visible example of the kind of damage done to our interior system from what is in the air. By osmosis, we are helped or damaged by words. Why? Words have soul. Words are coming out of another living being in a state of grace or not. I have noticed that when one is out of courtesy obliged to be in certain company, bad words are the norm. It's not a nice atmosphere. And yet some of these people might be officially people of prayer. What's going on there? Do we not believe that also the tongue is under the authority of the king and subject to his judgment one day? Is that part not also part of our copybook? Do our words not enter in indeed indelible ink on that copybook? As the Lord says in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36, every idle word. We will have to answer for every idle word. So all the bad words, what are they? Demerit, pulling the scales the other way. And yet we don't bat an eyelid. And words also create an atmosphere. Tender words heal. A little unexpected word, a joke, causes a giggle and a lightness and a healing. A deliberately hurtful word remains all day and perhaps all our life and damages relationships, sometimes irreparably. Words have existence and have sometimes a long history, so long that a word can make us go to hell. A word can make us go to hell. I told you before the story of the person in Spain in about 1936, put against the wall with a gun by the communists. He was to deny his faith or he was to get it straight away. And in the weakest moment of his life, he gave in. And they, with satanic glee, said, now we know you're going to hell, so we'll shoot you all the same. And with that, the bullet sent him with his long, long word, echoing forever into the beyond. Just a word! But as he could have been a martyr with the other word. It's not just a flatus vocis, a breath of air. But there's one thing I want to zoom into, it's this, because it concerns each of us without exception. It's what this reading contains. Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak. St. Faustina was given this spirituality of recollection. My daughter, said the Lord to her on one occasion, 3 virtues must adorn you in a particular way. Humility, which is linked with silence, isn't it? The humble soul is not a noisy soul. Purity of intention, that shows who we're serving. We told that in France one time, we are recompensed by the one that we serve. If it's ourself, it's self-gratification. If it's man, it's what comes from being gratified and honoured. If it's God, then it's true recompense. So our reactions show who we're serving, do they not? If we're really annoyed, ask why. Purity of intention is lacking. The third is love. Do not do anything else or anything other than that which I demand you to do. That's our temptation. A wordiness in our activity. Too much complication. Now, complication is linked with wordiness and too many messages. We can't be at peace if there's too much in our mind, and much of it does not have to be there. E.g., violent scenes on the television. They're not our problem, but they are if we choose to watch them. Procure to live in recollection, in such a way as to be able to hear my voice. That voice is so subdued that only souls who live in recollection can pick it up. So if there's just a cloud of words, we certainly will not hear that voice. The Lord, she says, gave me to understand how much a soul that speaks too much is displeasing to him. In such a soul, I do not find rest. Neither do we, actually. Il chiasso, that is din, continuous din, tires me. The Lord himself using this language. And in that din, the soul does not distinguish my voice. I would leave this with you, my friends. Cultivate the art of listening. The hint is there. He planted 2 ears in us and 1 mouth. Maybe the proportion should be such. For every word said, 2 should be heard. Observe a person who can't listen. That person does not know how boring he is. It exists even in public speakers, preachers who don't realize when people are no longer listening. But it exists also even in the car, even over a cup of tea, the mercilessness of someone who can't stop talking. It's a very heavy load for someone to bear, someone else. And on the other hand, the mercy of being a good listener, it's a huge blessing for someone just to pick up even what is not being said, to give that sacred space where they can express themselves and all the details. Just finish with one last linked point. One time in the novitiate, we were given a course of lectures by a nun psychologist who was very good. And she taught us to observe how people talk. Observe yourself, someone talking. How much displacement activity is going on? Cigarette smoking is a form of that. Also holding a cup of tea can be a form of that. But also other things like scratching one's face or whatever. It's displacement activity, it's leaking energy. Now, if one brings down that leakage, what happens? There's more concentration, isn't there? And there's more attention given to the input and the output. Calm is a huge advantage. One last thing. We're blessed being in this part of the world because our temperament helps us. Some temperaments do not. In Africa, temperatures rise very quickly, as also in the south of Italy. But also, conversation is very different. Just the other day, I was in Italy observing a priest friend answering a phone call on the mobile. It went something like this. You're trying to find me? Well, you must go down this street there, there, then turn there, and then you see a big church, and then it's round the corner there. All this on the phone. Another time I was in Rome, opposite the phone where I lived in the college, and you'd see the whole procession of mankind before the phone. The Americans were kind of okay, and so were the Brits, but when it came to the Sicilians, wow, it was something else. On a Sunday afternoon, phoning home, all this on the phone, raising their voice as though they could heard from Sicily without the phone. That's how half the world lives. In Oxford, I remember watching people talk there, and you weren't, even as it were, allowed to laugh. At the most, a tiny spark in the corner of one's eye as one said something to make one else giggle. But it was all to do with what? The calm, well-aimed power of the word.
Gestures. Lines written in Rome after observing how a Sicilian priest-student would converse on the telephone. Why do we talk twice or and heed not once what is not said? Why does the head not know how hands to still, and nerves that dance and bounce to every pulse they're sent, as if to show that we are well at home, that we have heard each syllable of sound? Can these not stand upon a moment's peace, and let a word come in and go without a pushing hand? Untempered South, whose mouthed truths beat all, is soul with soul made louder, made to hear, and is there room in volume for sounds small, or space in moves so large for moving near? Is there a way to live, a way to die, with little sound, but little made awry?